Thank you all for joining us today for the first in a series of webinars related to our College Readiness Now program. We're delighted to have so many of you here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon here in New Jersey. And we're pleased to welcome back to New Jersey, in this case virtually, Dr. Elisabeth Barnett from the Community College Research Center, whose work has been instrumental in the work we've done with our College Readiness Now program and the work that all of you've done in building and strengthening partnerships with your high schools. So thank you all for being here. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items on the front end. Number one, if you're able to, please mute your audio so we get a clean recording for those our colleagues who aren't able to join us. We are going to record this and make this available. Number two, if you would be so kind, could you include your name and email in the chat? Many of you are on our statewide distribution listservs for our affinity groups and presidents and the like, but some of you may not be. So I want to make sure that you folks get the follow-up materials that Dr. Barnett has so kindly provided. Speaking of follow-up materials, we'll make the recording available. We'll make her PowerPoint slides available. She's also put together two useful tools for you and your high school partners to use as you strengthen, develop, think about dual enrollment programs. So we want to make sure that all of you get access to those resources. Once the recording is ready via Zoom, those of you who've done this know, sometimes it's ready in 20 minutes, sometimes it's ready in 2 days, but as soon as the recording is ready, we'll get that out to all of you. So without further ado, we're pleased, as I mentioned, to welcome back to New Jersey via virtually, Dr. Elisabeth Barnett from the Community College Research Center, who is the senior research scholar there. Her work, as I mentioned, has influenced much of all of our work, not just here in New Jersey, but throughout the country in dual enrollment, college readiness, developmental education. The list goes on and on and on. We're very pleased that she's taking the time to be with us today. And without further ado, Dr. Barnett, I'm delighted to turn it over to you. Thank you once again for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jake. Thank you very much. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. There we go. Yeah, it's really nice to be with you people in New Jersey. I've been there a few times, and I'm sure a number of us have met in the past. I think we've been talking mainly about transition courses and different kinds of programs that help students finish high school college ready. And I think I also talked with people about multiple measures placement and assessment that has also been something I've been working on quite a lot. But dual enrollment has been close to my heart. I've been working on different projects off and on for about 20 years and was really excited to be part of a team at the Community College Research Center along with the Aspen Institute to look at ways that partnerships could be strengthened with an eye to advancing equity. So let me go ahead and jump in. If people have questions, please put them in the chat. We're going to be checking I'll stop every now and then, and Jake will have his eye on the chat, and we'll, answer questions as we go along, or we can, also have an opportunity at the end to do more. So, Community College Research Center, I think most people, have had some reason to use our materials. We have areas of research that expand, pretty much span from the high school to college transition into the community college years, and then the transition to four-year institutions in many cases, or to the workforce. We're located at Teachers College at Columbia University and have been around for about 25 years now. So today, as I said, the main focus is on equity within dual enrollment. And for that, or for this whole discussion, I'm going to be drawing mainly on this guidebook, which you can download. There's a link at the end. I don't know if you can see very well. But it's called the Dual Enrollment Playbook, a guide to equitable acceleration for students. And the two documents that Jake referred to, as part of developing this playbook, we also developed a couple of tools. And the idea is that you could use them either within your own institution or with your partners. And review what you're doing, think in terms of your current practice and whether there are any ways that you could change practice to make your program more equitable. And, I think those will go out to everybody. So, all right, but first we're going to do a little true or false quiz. Always fun. So if you could just maybe take a little piece of paper, put numbers 1 through 5 down. I'm going to read a few statements about equity and just note, number 1, true or false, number 2, true or false, that kind of thing. And, then I'll reveal the answers. So first of all, about 25% of US students participate in dual enrollment. Is that true or false? Second, higher rates of participation in dual enrollment are associated with greater inequity, with more inequity. So, in districts where more students are participating, we get greater inequity. Third, dual enrollment is more prevalent in urban areas, and AP, or advanced placement, is more prevalent in rural areas. 4, dual enrollment access varies substantially among high schools in the same district. And 5, about 1/5 of school districts have closed equity gaps with regard to access to dual enrollment. Okay, everybody have your answers written down? Okay. So here are the the actual information, and this is drawn from a paper by Shu, Fink, and Solansky on mapping racial equity. You can find it on the community college website if you're interested, Community College Research Center website. So the 2 false statements here were the number of students participating in dual enrollment in the US. It's about 10%, which is still a lot. And the other thing that was false here is that, in fact, dual enrollment is actually more prevalent in rural areas, and AP is more prevalent in urban areas. So, so if you got all of those right, just put your name in the chat. I'll give you a moment to do that. Yay for Chris from Hudson Community College.
Hi. That's fine.
And Betty Simmons also. All right. So that was just to kind of start the conversation. So let's move on from there. Before I share information from the playbook, I want to give you a little bit of background on the status of dual enrollment in the country. And this is mostly drawing on the work of John Fink, who's one of my colleagues at the Community College Research Center. And he's been doing some great work in terms of pulling together data, especially from, it's called the, what is it called? The Civil Rights Data Set from the US Department of Education, and looking at dual enrollment stats in the United States. So what we see is that over time, in particular since, this is blocking my screen a little bit. We see since 1999 through 2019, we've had huge growth in the country in dual enrollment. And where most of that growth is happening is in community colleges, though there is participation from other sectors. And we also have the data from New Jersey, which is this. And you see a similar pattern with one important exception. You appear to have a lot of participation from private nonprofit four-year colleges in New Jersey, which is not too typical of other states. So, I don't know if any of those folks are on the call, but it sounds like they would be important partners in any state discussions that you were having on this topic. But what we're seeing is that across the country, many colleges are finding increasing percentages of their students who are actually dual enrollment students. We're hearing in some places a quarter of all their full student population, sometimes a half. It's become, truly an important piece of the community college student body. And particularly as we've seen some drops in enrollment, people have been paying attention to this. So what about equity though? What we see, and this is US figures now, what we see is that across the US, if you just look at the first two bars, the first one is all high school students in the US, and the second is all dual enrollment students, anybody who took any dual enrollment course. What we see is, what we kind of expect, that there's a fair amount of inequity. White students are most likely to be represented, and Black students are particularly underrepresented as a percent of the population. The same is true to maybe a somewhat lesser extent with Hispanic students. But what about New Jersey? So here's the data for New Jersey, and this is fairly recent, and we see a fairly similar situation here. So we've got, we clearly have inequities in the population taking dual enrollment, and the question is what we can do about that. Oftentimes what we're looking at is a tightly linked economic piece to this. So we have students who are, perhaps less able to afford dual enrollment if it's something you have to pay for, or perhaps from schools or households where there would have been less exposure to dual enrollment as an opportunity. So what we see though is that across the country, there's a lot of variation in the actual gaps. And John did some digging and looked down at the district level to see, the extent to which, it was possible to reduce gaps. And what we see is that there is quite a lot of variation, as one of the true or false items mentioned. There's even variation of the high schools within districts sometimes. But across the country, what we saw was that 1 in 5 school districts have closed their racial equity gaps pretty substantially. And, that kind of awareness drove our interest in doing the research that I'm going to share today. So clearly it is possible to reduce gaps. So what can be learned? The question we were seeking an answer to is what can be learned from the high schools and colleges that are more effective in serving students of color through dual enrollment. So we zeroed in particularly on African-American and Latinx students, with an eye also to other groups who've been traditionally underserved. So the way we did it is that we were fortunate to get some funding from the Gates Foundation, working in close partnership with the Aspen Institute. We looked at state data sets from 3 states, from Florida, Ohio, and Washington. And what we wanted to do was identify pairs of high schools and colleges with above average participation rates and good outcomes for students who are historically underrepresented. And if New Jersey should want to do a similar analysis, we could put them in touch with John, and you might want to do an analysis of your own situation, see if there are schools and colleges that are doing an especially good job and could be role models. So we did a fair amount of digging into this data. We identified the partnerships that had the best outcomes, the smallest gaps, the best overall outcomes. And then we did a series of screening calls with them so that we could ask some questions, learn about what was going on, and try to pick sites where, where our time would be well spent on a site visit. Coming out of that, we did 3 site visits in each of the 3 states. And in each case, we visited colleges, high schools, and sometimes district offices. This research was going on right as the pandemic was starting. So our last 2 site visits to Florida were conducted remotely, which isn't the same, but I think we still got pretty good information from them. And, collecting a lot of data, did a lot of interviews, did a lot of analysis, and moved toward coming up with 5 principles that seemed especially important when trying to advance equity. So, in each case, what we were trying to do is look at, not only what they were doing in their dual enrollment programs, but the kinds of things that they did leading up to to participation in dual enrollment that might make students more likely and more prepared to participate. And then also to understand all of the kind of facilitating factors that were in the mix. You know, what kinds of partnerships they had, what kinds of school cultures they had. You know, we asked a whole lot of questions. So we came up at the end of the day with these 5 principles, and I'm going to talk a little bit about 3 of them mainly. So before I go any further, are there any questions about anything I've brought up so far?
None in the chat, Dr. Barnett. Anyone have any questions so far? Okay.
All right, let's go ahead. So the first one, which I'm not going to dig into too much because I think we all kind of have a sense of what this is, but you know, the idea that a shared vision between the higher education and the K-12 people seems to be really important. It is something that we saw in a lot of different places. And I just put up one example from Ohio here, where Lorraine County Community College president talked about this being a kind of moral imperative to not just have students come, you know, if they were able to come, but to actually go out and, you know, make an effort to find the students that could benefit from these programs and to reach down and pull students up, is what she said. And part of what they were doing was including dual enrollment as a part of their strategic planning and thinking about, you know, how to make it more accessible, and also thinking about different possible models. So they got Lorraine County developed an early college high school, for example, which is one model that's been particularly successful in reaching traditionally underserved students. You know, it can be more complicated to start and run, but you know, it can be an excellent option. So expanded access was another topic, and here I wanted to dig in a little bit more on some of the practices that we saw. So just one example here was, you know, Indian River State College in Florida set up a series of discussions with their K-12 partners on how to work together to address specifically Black and Latinx gaps in access. And what they were aiming for was the possibility that all students could have at least some dual enrollment or you know, what you might call acceleration experiences. So they might, I'm not sure what they included, but you know, oftentimes we're talking also about advanced placement. We're talking about international baccalaureate. We're talking about career technical education classes that are articulated. You know, so there can be a variety of ways of doing this. So the kinds of practices that we saw people doing, there was a lot of outreach to families. The idea was, you know, that it wouldn't be enough just to convince students that this was a good idea, that, you know, families would have to be involved in really understanding what some of the benefits would be, as well as, you know, what some of the extra challenges would be that students might need to spend extra study time and so on. But, you know, what we saw was often very compelling was the idea that they were going to be able to save a lot of money on college. You know, so that, you know, was not surprisingly something that families were very concerned about and was an important part of the marketing. Working with community organizations was fairly common, you know, especially those that might have, you know, special positions in the African American or Latinx communities. In some cases, colleges were analyzing the data from their different schools and figuring out which schools were less represented in dual enrollment and also had more underrepresented students, and you know, figuring out specific partnership activities that they could do to promote dual enrollment in those schools. And there was a lot of thought also going into the kinds of materials that would be most useful for students, for parents, for websites, for handouts at different events and so on. So those are the outreach activities. But access is also about thinking about who's actually eligible for the classes. So a fair number of places have been thinking about placement. And, you know, I talked earlier about multiple measures. I'm hearing more and more that multiple measures assessment for placement is being used with high schools as well as part of, you know, placing students into dual enrollment courses. And what we've found across a lot of research is that the high school GPA is a much better predictor of success in college courses than the AccuPlacer and really any other placement test that's being used. So potentially there are opportunities for schools to be thinking about more students who may be eligible, for colleges to be opening their classes to more students who may be eligible, and as they're making the changes at the college level in placement, which many colleges are these days, thinking about what the impact is on high schools. And related to that, rethinking placement criteria for specific courses. So, are there some courses that would be appropriate early dual enrollment courses where you might be able to set a slightly more, less stringent criteria for entry? And, there are a number of places where that's done. What's probably most often done is letting students start in student success courses. And, that can be very helpful in terms of helping introducing students to the college experience. Many times it doesn't require as high a level of reading, and certainly not math as other courses. So, for colleges that are using testing, we saw some places where they were very, they had set up testing schedules where students could begin testing early and, offering it fairly often and making it kind of a routine part of routine activity in the high school, so that, students would, maybe test earlier than you might expect they'd be ready, but that's, then a message that maybe there's some preparation they could do and maybe they're fairly close. And, maybe you could be offering some preparation activities or extra workshops, or, there could be some courses at the high school where college people could maybe help, provide a unit or some extra help. So those are the kinds of things that were going on. And, the schools that had started that were interested in the numbers of students that were showing up that, maybe people at the school hadn't thought were dual enrollment material, but, they show up on a test as doing pretty well. Or, the same could be true of multiple measures. You could see students showing up who, not everybody who had expected would be doing dual enrollment. And this last one I put under eligibility. You could kind of put it different places, but the idea of offering co-rec courses in the high school is something that I understand you've been doing in New Jersey. Not very many other people around the country are doing it, but it seems like an excellent idea, just a way to, make sure that students are getting that first college experience in math or English while having built-in structured extra help, that they don't have to go out and pursue separately. They don't have to go to a tutoring center or whatever. They're getting that extra help there. So I'm a big fan of this idea, although I think we don't really have research yet on, whether it would work well in high schools. We know it is a good, we know it does work well in colleges. Just in case anybody's not familiar with this model, what we're talking about is a college course with a companion extra help course, often taught by the same faculty member, but not always. And the extra help course, provides supplemental materials that will help students to do well in the college course. Ideally, very well linked and aligned with what's being taught in the college course at that time. So the last topic under access, managing costs, of course. I think what we see is in states where they have figured out a way to not charge students. And in some cases, it's not just states, some individual colleges have been able to figure this out. It makes a huge difference in access. It really is a barrier, even if it appears to be very little tuition. I think, students don't necessarily have the money, families don't necessarily have the money. They may be thinking, oh, when I get to college, I'll have a scholarship. Oh, it just makes a really big difference. So if there's ways to figure that out, one way that I've seen that be done is the last item here, which is credentialing high school teachers as faculty. So the college costs go down when the course is actually taught by a high school teacher, and that can be a win-win for everybody. So then, books are a big issue. Many schools are helping with figuring out whether the book schools purchase it, loan them to the students, use open access materials, transportation assistance, depending on the place, can be a big deal. So I think the bottom line here is sitting down and thinking about the financial barriers and ways to deal with them to the extent possible. Okay, the last access topic, I think I said that about the last one, but culture. So setting up an environment that tells students that this is, the dual enrollment is part of what, you're going to be able to do. So they come to the school, dual enrollment is being talked about from the first years. There are, discussions in assemblies, there are awards offered for students, in schools where they've been able to have students graduate with an associate's degree, which is becoming not so uncommon these days, making sure that that's celebrated in the school, or really any college credits that are earned. So it's thinking through the ways to set up the assumptions within the school that make a difference. So how can the college help with that? A lot of it, again, has to do with, talking with partners, seeing if there are ways to help, seeing if there are ways to, offer support, having faculty going into classrooms at the school to talk about, what some of the opportunities are. And especially where, you've got classes that may be of real interest to high school students that aren't available at the college. I mean, at the high school, can you have somebody go in and talk about graphic design or about, data science, or, there could be different things that will grab different students. So we did see a number of places where there was active work going on to address to address the biases that we all have, teachers and staff have. In some places, this was very organized. It was part of their professional development. In other places, it was less formal. So, and the last thing under culture is this idea of having the high school and college faculty get together. When people know each other more, I think it facilitates, being able to talk about what's going on across levels in a more effective way. In particular, the high school teachers can feel more confident and be able to say, this is what I know about college because I talked with college faculty about it. So. All right, so those were the main things we saw under access. Let me just see what the time is here. So advising and support, this was a high school in Washington where they talked with all students about the range of options that were available to them. And they also tied it to the students' high school and beyond plan. So what they were trying to do is encourage students to take dual enrollment or some other type of course, but not just any course, to be very thoughtful about how it fit into the overall plan. So for something like this, it seemed very important in some schools that students have opportunities to explore where they were going. And I think that's, pretty widespread, but it's not always so widespread to think about the alignment of the courses with the plan. And, if students have picked kind of a general area that they think they want to do career-wise, and I'm sometimes surprised how many students have, to try to make sure that they're taking courses that will point them in the right direction and maybe give them some early introduction to, say, medical terminology or, whatever it might be. Kind of related, I talked about different acceleration options, but kind of related to this, a number of places are doing program mapping. So they'll work together between the high school and the college to make sure that course sequences, or, there are different options, but, you have course sequences that are, that students and parents can look at that would get them to, whatever their goal is, whether it's, in this case, this is more like a transfer degree and the courses they might take. And it's thinking about both the college and the high school credits they get for each course and how they would all, be applicable towards some kind of degree program. One thing that we saw people talking about, especially in Washington, was what they called Franken transcripts. So you'd sometimes have a student with just this whole bunch of different courses that were put together that, didn't necessarily fit the criteria for graduation or, or for effective transfer. And so they were talking a lot about how to help students to be thoughtful about it, especially when they got to the point where they were taking more than one or two courses. And we've seen, for years, we've seen similar kinds of thinking going on in career technical education so that, students are starting a pathway in high school that, leads to a useful credential in college. The other main thing I wanted to highlight under advising and support is making sure that you're able to support struggling students. So if you're going to offer more access, what you don't want is to offer more opportunities for failure. So the people who are coming in because they have greater access may well be the students who are more on the margin academically, may not have done as well in the past. That may not be the case, but it could be. And in those cases, you want to make sure that there are clear systems of support. So, early alert systems, many colleges have these. Are there ways to make sure that the high school is getting plugged into this? If there isn't already a system of this kind, can one be put in place? Is there somebody who can do the follow-up, who, if a student is struggling, is going to go and find that student and have a conversation and make sure that they're getting some help? Because a lot of times students are not going to, reach out for help because they think they ought to be able to, they're in college, they should be able to do it. Forming those personal connections, making sure students feel like they, have somebody they can go to. And one thing that we saw pretty often in several of the places we visited is getting the dual enrollment students involved in college life in different ways. So, whether it was student council, yearbook, the Latinx Student Center, whatever it might be, forming that sense of connection, having peers to talk to and that kind of thing. So high quality instruction, that's almost a given, but I think there are two parts that I want to just point out here. And I just gave an example from somebody in Ohio who was getting students out into the community to study community problems that were, sometimes leading into later jobs, which was kind of cool. And a really important part for dual enrollment is making sure that you've got the on-ramps figured out. So, if you want more students to participate, how are we making sure that they're getting the preparation they need to have those opportunities and do well when they get there? So a lot of it has to do with making sure that those pathways that we were talking about, from high school into college, that they're starting really in the earlier grades so that students are taking the courses that they need to be ready. And whenever possible, that the high school and college pedagogy and content are aligned so that when they're taking the material in high school, they're getting a good foundation for those college courses. And acclimating students to college expectations. So they need the support, but they also need to know a lot about, what college is going to expect, ideally before they get there. So if, maybe your 9th and 10th and 11th grade teachers can be making sure they have some assignments that are aligned to the college expectations. And then in the dual enrollment courses themselves, I think these are things that many people are doing anyway, but, I think what we saw is the active learning techniques really made a difference to students. Thinking about the academic supports that could be built into the courses themselves. Some faculty had developed some study guides, some had figured out some peer support kinds of things in the classes. Student success courses we talked about. And then making sure you've got the right faculty, is important, and giving them the support they need. Some of them just need an extra hand to figure out high school students. So last of all, this is one I'm not going to go into a lot, but the idea that you need to organize your initiative to make sure that you're being intentional about, whatever you're going to do to try to promote equity. I think, it takes a fair amount of intentionality is what we saw if you want to, really make a difference here. So, finding the right people, looking at the data, finding ways to keep checking on the data and seeing whether you're making a difference, whether you're getting where you're going to go, and thinking about who the right partners are. Certainly the core high school college partnership. Are there any others that you need to bring in to make all of this effective, or groups from within the high school and within the college? So that's pretty much, those are a lot of our main findings. The playbook has more examples. It's nice sometimes to be able to actually, hear how specific schools and colleges were doing some of these things. So, hope you'll take a look and dig into that. The tools, will be coming your way, and you may find them useful just in having discussions. And, feel free to reach out to us too, if we can ever be helpful, or, if you've got ideas, just want to hear about whether we know anybody else who has tried something like what you've got in mind. So So let me stop there. And I don't know if you have any questions or if you want to talk about any of the things that I brought up.
I don't see any questions in the chat, folks. Let's open it up. If any of you have questions or comments, please, now's the time.
Is anybody working on a specific equity initiative right now that you'd be interested in sharing?
Yes, how are you, Professor Barnett? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Dr. Jackson from Ocean County College. We actually were just approached by a high school down in the southern part of our district, and they want to do an initiative very similar to what you were talking about. They want to take their entire ninth grade class and start them off in history. So not just the honor students and the AP students, they want to take the entire class and offer them world history, a class that's attainable, but they wanted to do it across the board. And then the other thing that, but you know, in doing that, and this is a district that's in need. They, you know, we're trying to create some equity here, but in doing that, they also need money. And so we were able to work with our foundation to offer a $250 scholarship to the students. So they end up only paying about $65. I think it's like 105 per credit for our dual enrollment students. So that's going to be something that we're going to be rolling out in the fall of 2021. We're really excited about it. The district is excited about it. So that's one of those kind of big initiatives that they approached us about. We do have, you know, the liberal arts degree program. We actually have a high school, Lacey Township High School in Ocean County, that actually does the AA. So we've graduated up to about 50 students from that program. We have another cohort coming in.
That's
They've
true.
been pretty consistent. So they're getting their AA in liberal arts before they get their high school diploma. And then most recently, we brought a whole high school onto our campus. So now we have a performing arts academy actually housed on our campus. And we work very closely with them. They had their first graduating class of 24 students this spring. So we're doing some of the things that you're talking about, and it's really interesting because, as you say, the dual enrollment landscape is so broad and so different. You know, and then being out that last year really kind of, you know, put us back a little bit. And then finally, and I'll turn it back over to you. And finally, before Jake came on board, the Center for Academic Success was asking us to do those out courses in the high school. So those courses with that co-requisite model. And we've been doing that now for about 2 years, and it's been actually very successful. We actually had one of our professors do a survey with the students, and they really spoke highly of the opportunity. And how we do it is we use our college readiness program to identify the students. And then in that high school, they've actually created a college readiness course for math and English. And we select those students. And so they are in the class, the English class, and then they're actually, those students who are in the English class also are in the college readiness class. And that's how they get that. So that same professor, you know, that consistency with that same professor. So she's teaching them college readiness, and then they also go to the actual English class with her as well.
That's excellent. So you guys are using a lot of different approaches. And I do think it's powerful when students get to the college campus, especially if it's not just let's walk around, if it's some kind of academy or something that can make a big difference. Yeah. With your history program, who's teaching that?
So we're going to hire the faculty from the high school. All of our, we hire embedded faculty. So we have about 200 faculty in the high schools that we work with. You know, we pair them up with professors at OCC if they have questions or anything like that. But we are going to have high school faculty from the history department. We're hiring 2 of their faculty, actually 3 of their faculty, and then we're going to pair them with 2 of our history faculty here at OCC. And we're going because, you know, these students aren't as strong as we, you know, we want them to be, because they're coming out of 8th grade, coming into 9th grade. This is like their first experience at high school. We're actually going to work around to do some wraparound services, some sort of like an out model, but for history. So they'll have a lab for the students who are struggling. They'll have the resources at the school. We have a couple of contacts. The tutoring center is going to be involved, and so we're going to have these wraparound services for them, so they'll be able to get the access they need if they run into any issues. And then we work very closely with the school. My assistant director, Elaine Chardin, she might be on the call somewhere. She works very closely with the school with advising and making sure the kids have everything they need in terms of getting in the class and being successful that way.
Nice. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Jackson. Other questions or comments or things to share, folks? I'll just share a couple of things. Oh, I'm sorry. Was someone going to go? Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, I'm Catherine Malone, and I'm the coordinator of the dual enrollment program at Bergen Community College in Paramus, New Jersey. And I've been, coordinating this program for about 12 years. Just lost the video. Just lost it.
We can hear you okay.
Can you hear me? Okay. Our program is based on teacher eligibility. So I might have, 5 or 6 courses running at one school, but at another school, I might only have one course. So, that's the problem we seem to be running into, and try to encourage the high schools to hire teachers with a master's degree in the subject area, or, they can have a master's in any area, but then they have to have 18 additional graduate credits in that subject area. So that's the problem we're running into. But then we also encourage the students to take courses on campus. They can start this summer before their junior year through a college experience program. But the beauty of the dual enrollment is that we offer the courses half price, half the current credit rate. And any student that is on the free and reduced lunch plan, they go tuition free. And they are only paying $15 for the registration fee, and that's a one-time fee. So, that's the way that we're trying to, encourage, access, and that's what we're working towards.
Yeah, that's great. That the availability of faculty is, an issue I hear about across the country. And, I have heard of some school districts moving toward any new hires, trying to get people who are credentialed, but that's not always possible either. So.
Other questions or comments, folks? A couple things to whet our appetites. One, Dr. Barnett, I'm not sure if you're aware, but I think with our College Readiness Now program, we've had as many as 13 of our community colleges deliver the accelerated learning program model into the high schools with the co-requisite English and math, both. I think math was the predominant program early on, as Dr. Jackson mentioned, and then we were able to expand it. Many of our colleges were able to expand it to English. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, I think this past year we had only 9 of our community colleges doing that ALP program with the high schools, primarily because of the emergency remote learning that was still continuing in New Jersey and difficulties reaching out to students to get them to participate. But I think that's encouraging that we've got 13 of our schools that do that. And then secondly, I actually had a question to get your thoughts on one thing, and I'm dating myself by asking this question. I remember about 20 years ago when we really started to make a push to have our community colleges more formally involved in dual enrollment. One of the selling points we put into play at the time was a strategy to address senioritis, helping seniors get access to 3 or 6 credits before, and minimally 3 or 6 credits before they graduate, and help keep them enrolled and interested in high school before they graduate, so they don't lose any points on their GPAs. I'm wondering, in some of the statistics that you shared, the national statistics, I saw that it was primarily ages 17 and under. I'm wondering what your thoughts are, any observations you have from the work you've done on this project or others on the impact on dual enrollment on seniors. Has it significantly helped those seniors? Are there any recommendations you would give our colleges in working with seniors particularly?
Well, yeah, it is mostly seniors who participate. So were you thinking about one of the slides I showed?
Yeah, just the data, I think, captured the national data early on that you showed, the national and the longitudinal data was 17 and under, the growth of dual enrollment in students 17 and under nationally and in New Jersey.
I think it's 17 and up. So
17 or younger.
all right, I'm gonna have to get on John for that. It should be 17 and up.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Oh, no, wait a minute. No, I'm right. No, he should get on me. I'm right. I mean, you're right. So what we're talking about really, he didn't have where they were actually enrolled. So he assumed 18-year-olds were in college and he assumed 17-year-olds were in high school. So yes, this is 17 and younger. So these are, that's how he defined his dual enrollment population. As far as your question about seniors though, I think it still holds that, first of all, it's mostly seniors who are enrolled in dual enrollment, some 11th graders, but that's, considerably less common and, very few younger than that. And, I think it still is seen as, a way to make better use of the senior year. That's changed a little bit because in many places there didn't used to be like, 4 required math courses, for example, so there was maybe a little more room in the schedule than there is now. But I think it's widely seen as a way to try to keep students engaged and, to get a head start. And, I think, certainly a lot of parents are on board with that idea. As far as how to make it the most meaningful to students, I think that, what we hear is 2 different things. One is, why don't you go ahead and take your gen eds, that you're going to be needing in college, you'll get them out of the way, which is always too bad to hear, interesting subjects talked about that way. But, so they'll try to get, use their senior year to try to get a head start on college, basically. The other thing we hear a lot about is trying to use the senior year as a way to dig in on, a career area and, perhaps get a head start in, whatever their interest might be, take some of those career focused college courses and maybe, some complementary gen eds too. And, but either way, I think those are the 2 most common reasons for doing it. There's also a certain amount of controversy around the idea of using the senior, using dual enrollment as a way to explore. So some of my colleagues will say, no, people are taking, random acts of dual enrollment, why should they be, using this valuable resource just to kind of, take this or that. I think there are other people, including me, that think that sometimes you need to, try out something before you know whether it's going to be for you or not. So I think there can be some value in taking courses that, give you a better idea of what your future direction might be. So.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from across the board, folks? All right. Well, Dr. Barnett, thank you so much for joining us this past hour. We hope your return to New Jersey was a pleasant one virtually. And
so much easier.
We will have to do this again. And thank you so much for all the work you've done that's helped to shape our partnerships and programs with our community colleges and high schools, and the work you continue to do, and all of your insights you've provided to us over the years on our College Readiness Now program, and for joining us today. As I mentioned on the front end, everyone, we'll make this available to all of you, and the resources that Dr. Barnett described, they will be available to you as well as soon as the webinar recording is available. I'll get that out to all of you. So thank you all once again for joining us, and especially to you, Dr. Barnett, thank you for doing this for us. And with that, everyone, enjoy the rest of the day. Have a great rest of the week and weekend, and we'll see you all very soon. Before you go, just a quick plug. We have a series of College Readiness Now webinars that we're doing on Thursdays at 2 o'clock from now to August 12th. We invite all of you to join us for those. If you've not received the calendar invite, please just send me an email or put a message in the chat, and we'll make sure you get invited to those webinar presentations from our colleges talking about infusing career pathways and career exploration into our College Readiness Now programs. So thank you all once again. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll sign off. So take care, everybody.
Thank
you
you.
very much. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.